Like I'm like I think he might call, I think he might fold, but then like after 10 seconds, sometimes I'm just like he's just gonna call, and I just accept it, and like my anxiety lowers a little bit, which is kind of crazy. Um, it's really weird when that happens, but like sometimes that happens to me where as soon as I accept that he's gonna call and I lost my stack, even before he calls, I'm like I accept that he's gonna call. My anxiety lowers. It's kind of funny how that
I
works.
can't. I can't accept it.
You never accept it, eh?
I refuse to accept it.
You refuse to accept. I refuse. You should fold every single time I go all in.
Draw,
Uh,
I draw a line in the sand at acceptance. Like,
all right, continuing on. Continuing on. Okay, so now we went through the pre-grind anxiety. And this is not, again, this is not a snap the fingers fix. I'm not saying it is. It's a work in progress, and it's a continuous work. Okay? Now let's talk about anxiety at the tables, which is a whole different topic because while you're at the tables, it's hard to do all these things like befriending your anxiety, accepting your anxiety. Like, it's hard to, because you're thinking about poker, your mind is there. You feel it at the tables. I would go out on a limb and say every single person feels some level of anxiety at the tables. And I feel very firmly about that. If you go all in for a stack on the river and somebody's timing 15 seconds and you don't feel anything at all, that's a little bit weird. I think you should feel something. You should feel something. There has to be some kind of resistance there where it's like, that's where it comes from, by the way, too. You're resisting him calling. Let's say you have a bluff, you haven't accepted that. Like once it's funny. This happens to me sometimes. Tell me if it ever happens to you. I make an all-in play, and the guy is timing. Let's say he has 15 seconds in the time bank. For the first 10 seconds, I'm so anxious because I'm resisting that he might call, and I'm like, oh man, he's gonna call. Like I'm like, I think he might call, I think he might fold, but then like after 10 seconds, sometimes I'm just like, he's just gonna call. And I just accept it, and like my anxiety lowers a little bit, which is kind of crazy. It's really weird when that happens, but like sometimes that happens to me where as soon as I accept that he's gonna call and I lost my stack, even before he calls, I'm like I accept that he's gonna call. My anxiety lowers. It's kind of funny how that works.
I can't. I can't accept it.
You never accept it, eh?
I refuse to accept it.
You refuse to accept. I refuse. You should fold every single time I go all in.
I draw a line in the sand at acceptance. Like the 5 stages of grief, I will cycle through the other 4 when it comes to him calling, him or her. But I will not accept, especially if it's a bullshit call too.
Yeah.
And then my anxiety is going sky high. They call with blockers to all of the bluffs. They're the stupidest hero call ever. I just show up with so few bluffs in the spot. They have the worst time they could possibly call. They still find the call. And then they are rewarded for their poor decision making. And I am punished for my wizardry. And now I'm even more anxious because, can these guys see my fucking cards? Like, did I give a timing tell away? Is there something about me that makes these people call in these spots? Like, how could I ever bluff? If people call in this spot, they'll never fold in any spot. How am I ever supposed to pick a bluff? Now my anxiety's sky high.
Yeah.
I can't accept this.
Yes. No. Listen. I'm gonna get to that in a second, but I do want to touch on one thing before I touch on exactly what you just said. Personally speaking, I find that my anxiety is way higher when I sticking on the topic of river bluffs. I find that my anxiety is a lot higher if I'm not sure it's a good river bluff or not. When I know for certain I have a good river bluff and I'm for sure that it's a good spot, I'm more accepting of the outcome. The Scott that's not in role playing, can you relate to that?
Am I out of character now?
Yeah, come back into the Scott.
If
you know for sure there's but I'm more anxious about the spot where like I'm not sure I should have bluffed this spot. If he calls, I'm going to be kind of upset because I'm not sure if I should have took this spot. It feels worse. So again, to alleviate that, again, it comes down to like studying River bluffing spot. Like, it comes down to more studying. More studying is the answer for a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to everything you just said, you're like, I can't accept it. If you make a river bluff and he calls specifically with like a hand that has terrible blockers, terrible call, it drives you crazy and it makes you more anxious, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and when that happens, you know, the truthful answer is, in that moment, there's nothing you can do about that. You know, you're gonna have to feel that anxiety. But again, you have to bring logic back into things. At the poker tables, you always want to. You're gonna feel a lot of emotions at the poker tables, like ups and downs, but you always want to come back to logic. So in that spot, let's say if I feel it too. I feel a sudden rush of anxiety when I get called by something. Especially if it's a combination, right? Firstly, I'm bluffing a spot where like is iffy. I'm like, I'm not sure if I should have took this bluff, and I take it, and I'm already anxious about taking that spot, and he calls me with a hand that has no business calling me. You feel that rush of like you know what I'm talking about. That rush of anxiety, that rush of fear, that rush of anger, that rush of tilt, whatever you want to call it. Every poker player knows what I'm talking about. You feel that. You can't stop that, unfortunately. There is no answer to that. You cannot stop that. You can feel that, see what just happened, logically see what just happened. This guy just made a horrific call. You need to use that to your advantage for future playing scenarios. So if he made like a really wide call in a certain spot, maybe he's just calling too wide on certain textures or on certain runouts or whatever. So you need to make that note. But as far as like getting rid of anxiety at the tables, this is going to be an unpopular answer, but you cannot, which is a similar answer to life. As far as getting rid of anxiety in real life, you cannot. But what you can do is not let that anxiety ride you like a horse, you know, throughout the day. You know, you can let it pass through your body by accepting and befriending it. But the original anxiety that pops up, you can't just be this human that doesn't feel things, you know, all right? So stop it. Anybody that's watching this video thinking that they're going to find some simple fixed answer, cut it out. Anxiety is a part of life. You are a human. You are not a robot. You will feel anxiety. You will feel tilt. All those things will be there, okay? We're talking about managing it here, not getting rid of it. Like I said before, don't think about getting rid of anxiety. You manage it by letting it happen, befriending, accepting. At the tables, how do you recover? Tell me about how you recover. Do you play differently? Scotty, you feel this anxiety. This guy just made this terrible call. He slapped you in your face, basically, with that call. And then, you know, maybe you didn't even see him in the games afterwards. He took your money and he ran off. That's it. He's done. Bam. Maybe it was a fish that did it. Maybe it was a whale. He beat you in like a 10x, a 25, whatever it is. And he just ran off. That's it. He's done. Finished. How do you deal with that? Like, how do you continue going about? Are you feeling anxious for a very long period of time after that? Are you feeling anxious after the grind? Let's talk about, we can get into after grind anxiety to all that. How do you deal with that situation?
Well, first thing is start picking up the pieces of my laptop from the floor.
You don't break your laptop. We know that.
Oh, okay.
But like,
okay.
I mean, I don't think many people break their laptops. I would hope not.
Well,
I mean, I don't know.
What are the
Maybe
options?
the mouse.
Quit?
Maybe the mouse.
Definitely
Maybe the mouse.
Definitely the keyboard. Quit is an option. So
Okay.
just log out, fuck this, go do something else.
Even if the game's over, you would quit?
It's an option after that bullshit,
Okay.
after that hero call.
Hmm.
Yeah. Other options would be play maniacally aggressive because I'm steaming, and try and force spots that aren't really there to attempt to conjure up some good EV. You know, turn some negative EV spots into plus EV spots with brute aggression,
So
or
make plays that you normally wouldn't make.
Yeah,
Okay.
in the hopes of forcing home some EV, or the opposite of that sometimes, which would be to crawl back into my shell, stop making bluffs, try and low variance cooler my way to a nice win today, or at least minimize my losses. So giving up on those spots like the one I just took, even if I think it's a great spot, I'll just pass it up. That way I don't have to deal with the pain. Much happier losing a small part 100% of the time than losing my whole stack, 20% of the time. So maybe I'll shut down my bluffs. So these are options depending on how steamy I am. If I'm out of control steaming, I'll quit. If I'm really, really steaming, then I'll go charging into people with mindless aggression. And if I'm a little bit less steamy, then maybe I'll start shying away and just feel sorry for myself.
Yeah, that's quite a lot to unpack there. So lots of deviation in your game when you're. Well, you know what's funny? We call it anxiety, but we're really talking about tilt. When we talk about in-game anxiety, we're really talking about like.
It's how it manifests, isn't it?
There is a difference, but we're kind of getting there. Like originally, we were talking about the original anxiety. Like when you go all in and you're waiting for someone to call, it's not really tilt. It's actually anxiety. But then, like once somebody makes that bad call, now you just flip the switch to tilt. So now we're talking about tilt. When you're talking about how like after the call. So before we were talking about anxiety. So now we're getting into tilt.
But I think that tilt
go hand in hand.
Also it manifests as anxiety. Like not pulling a bluff because you're scared of the result is a form of tilt. That is,
and anxiety. It's both. They do go hand in hand. So let's talk about that. With in-game tilt, the advice I always give, slow down everything. Breathing, physiology, the way you move, the way you click your mouse, how fast you're acting. Slow down everything. Even, trust me, I know when you're in the midst of it, you don't feel like doing any of this stuff. You want to do everything as fast as possible. But you need to slow down. And then when it comes to trying to feel less tilt or less anxiety at the tables, it comes to your off-table work, So it's like, you always talk about, do the GTO gym, not while you're at the tables, when you're off the tables. And then at the tables, you're showcasing it. Same thing with anxiety. Like, it's hard to work on your anxiety in the midst of at the tables while you're doing it. The only thing I think you can actually do that's going to really help, and it helps a lot if you can do it, is slow down that breathing, breathe down into your stomach, very slow down your movements, slow down your actions. That's always my answer for that. Slow everything down, no matter how painful it feels like to do that. You need to do it. But as far as, and then you get into all the off-table stuff as well to try to lower that anxiety. And for everybody watching, there's no it's funny. I feel like people sometimes click around on like YouTube and they're like, oh, I'm gonna find a way to shut off this anxiety completely or shut off the tilt completely. Tilt and anxiety is not a what's the name? It's not a light switch. It's a dimmer, right? You can only dim it. You're not shutting anything off. So if you're here trying to shut it off, if you're anywhere trying to shut it off, we got some terrible news for you. You're not. There's no off button. You can only dim, right? So we're talking about our strategies to dim that anxiety, to dim that tilt, so that it's not affecting your game. So, Mr. Scott, is poker a logical game or is it an emotional game?